the practicalness. You see, a church that doesn't talk only to your spirit, but to your life, to human beings, where we used as young people to say, Mfundisi, bantu abekho la sondweni, sibashiyela pha msunduzi. Siyanini kuyobahlola. They need the church there, not here, where it's comfortable. So we were always anchored in poor people and the issue of social justice. If you teach to my spirit and not my orientation, values, and principles, then you have left me somewhere. I just want to say, one thing that generally I had believed in is when you do something, it must have an outlook. It must have a shape, content. You don't do something that you can't say the tail and the head. It's an amoeba that is endless. No, into the youth politics is about the fact that there's a good cause here, but the cause is disorganized. Or it's not sufficient. It's a stage of development. Let me not judge it and say disorganized, but it's a stage of development. So every generation doesn't spend time complaining about the previous generation. It spends time elevating the structure to the next level. You learn and you're inspired by those below you, but they will have their own shortcomings, just as you will have your own shortcomings. But the future of the youth is not separate from them. By the way, the slogan of SNAS, we are members of the community first before we are students, was our manifesto, the Progressive Alliance manifesto. That's what we believed. If you don't develop me, when you take me, you can use me as you like. That's what leaders do today. They mobilize you around anything, and you begin to think they are the future. Your future is them. Somlandela, lapho eya khona somlandela. Awungena emgodini umuntu solumlandzela. Our struggle was not about the colors of one political party or the other. So we never lose sight. That's why I said I'm a Marxist first. The rest is secondary to me. It's about the cause of the working class and the poor in Swaziland, in Africa, all over the world. I don't want that we begin to think that Tinkundla must think backwardness of gathering people is going to serve the future society. It's not. So the ability to understand the future in the past and balance it is very important. That's why we must innovatively say, what change will the change we are looking for bring? If we were to say putting a political party into power is the solution, then we will be two reductionists of our structure. That's exactly why in Swayoko we said, we see the manifesto of freedom. It's good. We want multi-party democracy. But you cannot have multi-party democracy where elites and palace politics overrule the substance. That means whether it's multi-party democracy, but the most important thing, what revolutionary substance is it changing in the life of Mage Ngwenya le Ngaba, Mage Dlamini le Mpuleng? That's the answer. That's why Fidel Castro, when he was asked by South Africans, we are told, whether here is the right policy for South Africa, he said, if it adds a plate on the table of a family, it's the right policy. That's the only way to determine.
So whether you need the cat, whether it catches, as long as it catches mouse.
So I will not necessarily call it names. A political party that represents, by the way, the Republicans is a political party. Just like the most reactionary, the Sierra Leonean, RUF, was a political party. We must not think political parties just as in political parties are change. You need revolutionary, profound change that change power relations in the benefit of society. The ultimate, because lumpens organize themselves into political parties. Opportunists are in political parties. They always look at vehicles. So the most important thing is not the colors of the vehicle. That's why I don't care about colors. I don't care about political party names. I care about the substance. Tomorrow, if you were to have a political party that will bring qualitative change in Swaziland, in Africa, don't make a mistake. Or not play around colors. I don't owe any colors anything. I've made a contribution not to colors, not to a party, through a party to society. I just think political parties will not always be the only entity in Africa. We must forge a progressive movement. A progressive movement is the student movement, is the trade union movement, is progressive church movement, is progressive environmental forces. Because not all of us came one way. We have many people fundis and made a progressive contribution. We have many people who came to the student movement. So we must always nourish the movement. The movement must always be at the center. So the choice in Swaziland is between a fat, lazy family and a tax for services, transport, and development of society. And I'm afraid the people will not tolerate that forever. I hope my belief is not going to be proven true. Because unfortunately, we can change forms of organization. Political parties will be rendered irrelevant if they are unable to understand that science of development is such that you will not have the budget, the extra budget that will sustain that family. It has been feeding on parasitism. If you want to sustain a parasitic budget, then continue with it. So I just think some hard truths are uncomfortable to talk about, but there must be people who keep sticking to them. It's led by any Harry, Tom, Dick, and Can. It will reflect that Harry, Tom, Dick, and Can. So with the Vietnamese revolution, it was a united front of all democratic forces, but led by the most advanced detachment. It's indispensable, non-negotiable, that the advanced detachment must place itself to lead society, because the backward ones will lead society to where?
Welcome, Masuku, to the bridge. You are difficult to get. People even forget you. So I really Swazi. Where do you come from, really? People don't believe Nabakbona when you talk in public platforms.
Trenches.
But tell us a bit, where do you come from in Swaziland? You're growing up, and actually how you got to cut your political teeth.
Yeah, siyabonga ngumalo nale msebenzi lomhle the bridge le wenda. Mina ekhaya kithi ku kaMsunduza naseNgaba. Ngicala ngaMsunduza ngoba vele ngatalelwa ngakhula ngahlala kaMsunduza. I did everything. eNgaba ngiye bomake nababa seba retire. So I was that old. I was old, but ekhaya kithi kaMsunduza naseNgaba ngafunda St. Francis. From grade 1 to form 5, I never changed school until university. That's where I was a bit of a rebel at St. Francis, but when I got to university, my rebellishness got content.
But when you say a rebel who picks up a t-shirt or there's content to a rebel, you know.
No, it was content.
Okay.
I will always question many things. My mother will tell. We used to debate even sometimes in Butalamanya Maves. Sometimes ngibuta lamanye ukuthi why itsine sihlupheke bukhosini baphila kahle uma ke bangithulise but ngithule but with a grudge. So it was that kind of rebel, but I was very respectful. I was very respectful, considerate, and hated people rebels without a purpose.
Yeah, so but did you ever play sports? No one knows you for good interest in sports or any other recreational activity other than politics.
No, I was a hardened football player.
You lie.
I'm from a family where my father. Oh, sorry. My father.
Yeah.
Originally come from Kaba. Wahamba, the first job I told was Bulembu. Wasuga eBulembu wetem babana to sebenda because of football. He was called Kalamazu. So I'm from my brother who comes after me was a captain of Amawele, Kamsunduza, and the captain of St. Francis school team. He was one of the few players who could be a goalkeeper, nakshot defender, nakshot striker. He was called the general, Sukus, if you were to ask that. So my name, the scholar, if you ask classmates in about 1990 St. Francis, there is a name that they call me, Bull Moral. After Simon the Bull Lehoko, the chief's defender, the legendary defender, Simon the Bull Lehoko. So there was a time when we were playing at St. Francis and our team was under severe attack. I defended my territory. Every time I cleared, they would say, the boom.
So you're a defender?
No, I'm a midfielder. But at that time I was called to defend because our defense was. So I was versatile in all of them. In fact, it's just that because of education, we didn't emphasize on football. So I am a football player. Manzini Wanderers ardent fan, and Kamsunduza Amawele. I used to love rebels because I love teams that dribble.
But I mean, when you come to university, you seem to have forgotten about your football or athletics or whatever sports thing, and you went straight into school. What do you call it? Still representative body, and politics took over from there.
No, I must admit, time got lost. There was nothing else I could do.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm also a musician. I was singing the Swazi vocal waves. Even in church, I used to sing bass. Even at school, St. Francis, I was singing. So I do know when your baritone or your first song, your first voice is not.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying I have been in multiple sports. But anyway, when I went to university, with this gripe I explained earlier, of feeling injustice, growing up in Msundu, as saying people without food, it overwhelmed me. When I went, when I joined because I joined Putemo first, before Swayoko. Then when I joined Swayoko, it was where I found my youthful expression. But I first of all was recruited into Putemo. And from there, I never looked back.
But you always are very fond of church and the Lutheran. You hardly speak without mentioning the church. What influence did the church do to you, especially the Lutherans, the way you so much like that church?
No, definitely. The church was my home. It was where I learned many things, including basic organization. That when you present a finance report, you every Easter, we used to make demands. Let's account for this money, yani. So the accountability systems, I learned them from the church. Organization systems, I learned them from the church. Including how sometimes many non-Lutherans were sponsored. There's a former Swayoko leader who testified that he was never a Lutheran, but he completed his school because of the Lutheran Church. So it has taught me how to be, many things, how to be able to service human beings and humanity, and including basic, what we call politics, but being interested in social justice issues. I learned them from the Lutheran Church. I found expression on things I had questioned that I wouldn't. So I just want to indicate that the Lutheran Church, including the Council of Swaziland Churches Youth Desk, it was an initiative of the Lutheran Church together with 3 other churches.
Oh.
Yes. There was no youth desk. We felt all people now are too soft. They are not focusing. They are removing the church from the deep issues. We realized we need that's why the first person who was put there was the Anglican. Because we used to work with the Anglican. It was the Roman Catholic, it was the Lutherans, Roman Catholic, and the Anglican.
Oh, yeah.
Close at the Methodist. So the first person there was from the Anglican. And since then, even Bongani Masuku is a product of that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But then at the university, why did you go for social sciences? Because I'm told, someone tells me you're a very bright student, and even in your class, they speak very highly. I've met, there's a colleague of yours, I don't know if you remember, Nozipo Mkacho.
Oh, yes.
She says, Bongani is my classmate, but I've heard others who say you were very bright in school. I would have imagined you went into the natural and hard sciences. Were you always a person of social sciences?
No, I must admit, at home, we grew up being a family of the profession that was admired, accounting. So to be a chartered accountant was my dream. I was inspired by many people. My brother, the late Temba Masuku, was an accountant all his life. So I was inspired into that. But and then at some point, as I changed, I became interested in law because of justice issues. But my mother discouraged me with everything she had on law. You represent criminals. So I was afraid. Now, social science was a balance between the two extremes.
Yeah.
Because I do want to represent people, to articulate there's a problem in society. But equally, the accounting figures only to me were not making sense. So a balance, social science became the balance. So I finally was settled with social science.
Yeah, but there's a story that I've heard that at very young age you went into Chris Hani's funeral. What's the story? Tell us that story there, because at the time, I mean, Swaziland is not much into South African politics, but you not just were following, but also went all the way to attend this funeral. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, At first, we were on Easter. You remember that he was killed on an Easter weekend.
Okay.
We were on Easter in the church, the Lutheran Church in Babana. Babengosi, who used to be president of the Federation of Business in Swaziland, was a member of the Lutheran Church, but was a South African based in Swaziland. So Babengosi said to me, during break in the church, just like that. Ish, for a minute, the world was, because he was one of the person I admired, the world was a bit silent. Then when I went, then as comrades, because I was writing exams, you know, UNISA writes exams around that time. Mm-hmm. I was writing exams. When I went, comrades, Comrade Noche, Comrade Dominic, re-indicated they've organized a bus, transport. We were told through the appropriate structures. I left exams. And we jumped into the two cars. One contributor petrol, the other one Babenoch. So we drove all the way to Johannesburg. At first, there's a building in Johannesburg, Commissioner Street, where we parked first, and then we went to FNB. Oh, it was an experience. Mm. It was an experience, and we were seated just right behind the stage throughout the night, and it's cold. And then in the afternoon, we were taken to Babenoche's home in Alexandra. Not in the early morning to go water, to get something to eat and to refresh. And then, of course, the family requested a private. Then we went back home. Along the way, we thought the whole of South Africa was exploding. Buses from Mpumalanga, Zulu Natal, full, the whole N4, the whole journeys. So it was an experience. Others were on top of the buses. You see, there's like in other countries. It was real. It was real. That's when I realized
how big the man was.
The man was above. I thought it was only a few of us wailing in our heart. South Africa was almost at the point of explosion.
I remember we've seen some footages of how bad the things were.
Yeah.
But also, but why Chris Hani? Like, why would you have interest on some Chris Hani? Very few Swazis other than South Africans who are in Swaziland were interested in South African politics. What ignited your interest in South African politics? Number one, politics in general, but also Chris Hani in particular.
No, I think generally, I was, from my first year university, when I began to gather my orientation, my outlook has never changed. I've been a Marxist, Leninist. I was inspired, I still am inspired by those ideas. Talk about Fidel Castro, talk about Lenin, talk about Karl Marx, talk about Frederick Engels. I have never had doubt. At first, at some point, some said, it's because you are still a young rebel. 20 years later, we'll talk to you. Some of them, I've invited them, including Peter, my friend, that we come to talk today now. Because I'm now 40 years later into where I am. I've never changed. The outlook of the world is proven daily to be correct, scientific, and the only truth. Even in my orientation in Pan-Africanism, the Swazi struggle, my orientation is about the class struggle, the only science of development and progress. Outside that, sometimes you become inconsistent, you vacillate. Today you are extreme left, tomorrow you are extreme right. But consistency is built by ability to understand development as a science.
Yeah, but how do you balance then your church orientation and being a Marxist? Because you seem to have found that balance quite healthy.
Oh yes. The practicalness. You see, a church that doesn't talk only to your spirit but to your life, to human beings, where we used as young people to say, Mfundis, bantu abekho la sondweni, sibashiyela pha msunduz. Siyanini kuyobahlola. They need the church there, not here, where it's comfortable. So we were always anchored in poor people and the issue of social justice. If you teach to my spirit and not my orientation, values, and principles, then you have left me somewhere. That's why sometimes we must be honest. Some churches are able to to talk to your spirit, but unable to talk to the fact that in the morning did you eat? Where do you live? And how are your children? No one cares. People just come and trumpet your spirit and leave you. But you have children. Now, Nigela, it must be because it comes from somewhere. So your strength comes from your life.
So your church spoke to both of those things, and therefore
yes.
you felt comfortable enough with the Lutheran Church.
Yes, I always admire the Lutheran Church's ability to balance the two. Up to this day, not because the chair of the school governing body is my cousin, but if you look at him sitting in Nyembe and what he does, he balances it so well up to this day.
You know, you spoke of a man called Semnoche. Ever since I've known you, you've always admired three people that never get out of your head. Semnoche, Mario Masuku, and Mandla Hlachwago. But I want to talk a bit about Semnoche because Swazis may have forgotten or they don't know. Why is this man so important to you? And who is he?
Simon Noche was one of the most outstanding human beings. You know, you must do a research about someone called Father Lapsley. Father Lapsley has been with the Cuban cause. He was at you must just take time to be able to study him. Simon Noche and Father Lapsley share one thing. You know, Simon Noche didn't have many things, but he was a human being. He was never tempted to steal anyone's resources, even in the middle. He will carry us like his own children. He will go to his office and use it to be raided by the army and the police. He will never chase us away.
But who was he? Swazi, South African, human rights activist? What's his story?
South African who, during the liberation struggle, silently, who also was a tennis player, silently went to Swaziland. Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, and many other ANC operatives in Swaziland would link with him. There is a book written about how he used to work. But anyway, he stayed in Swaziland very silently, and he was such a mentor to youth. He loved the youth with all his heart. You know, Bush, there's a comrade called Bush who did science at university. He passed on, may his soul rest in peace. He used to joke, so we knew who was the first one when we needed him. Where we have slept, what we have eaten, sometimes we wouldn't have, but he's being there, sometimes reprimanding us. Precisely because we're a fool. And sometimes you get shocked, but he wasn't into romanticizing when you have done something
But
wrong.
basically, because maybe our listeners may not understand, he was a human rights activist who immersed himself in the cause of the youth and the people of Swaziland.
He was a Marxist. He always emphasized that. Simon Noche in dialectics will lecture till the end of the day. But one thing he said, I will not go around preaching I'm a Marxist. But when we did classes of dialectics and materialism, Noche will take you in the simplest form what dialectics and Marxists are. That's when I learned. To be a Marxist is not how many words you quote, it's what you do. So Noche would always say we must remember him for who he was. He was a Marxist, rooted in the organic struggles of people and not lecturing them and patronizing them with words. He was with them in a only a few who were next to him would understand Simon Noche is a Marxist.
But he also was involved in the human rights organization in the country.
Those are the sites of struggles, terrains of struggles were linked to his organic understanding that people are people before they are something else.
At the university, you come to you were nonsense, to use the words, to Mage Professor Peggy Makubu. Lydia Makubu. What were the big issues of the time as student body that you were dealing with, that you immersed yourself in?
Oh, yes. The university was a site of struggle for many years. We have comrades that we took from. The leaders of Comrade Mandla Hlachwago, the leaders of Comrade Dominic Mngomezulu, the leaders of Comrade Gavin McFadden, the leaders of Patricia McFadden, many outstanding, including South African. Bomzala, Bomzwakembuli, we used to get stories about them and inspiration. That university looked small, but it produced and was a home to outstanding human beings that we still are to honor them properly. It also produced opportunists. We do know many opportunists who came from there, but let me just say the outstanding human beings who came from there. So we were standing on the shoulders of
Giants.
men and women who walked those corridors with pride, with greatness.
Okay, I want us to briefly to come back into organizational development, because you're big on that thing and you seemed to have demonstrated it. I mean, not so many ways, but there's a lot I want us to discuss. You then become the president of Swayoko and you transform Swayoko in the best way that you felt how. And I am not really talking about soccer, I'm talking about youth politics in general. Maybe when your niche was Swayoko, but you were involved in bigger youth politics. How and what do you think is your biggest contribution in youth politics and developing of organizations and the importance of organization in changing society?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. The youth, first of all, has a future to lose, and it's free from most of our burdens, bonds, monthly payments, the things that hold us back. You owe this, you have to pay for children's school. So the youth can be selfless, can focus on what they do. They can, the whole night you could be writing a document, the next morning you are seated in a meeting, clarifying, at night you consolidate what you. So the work ethics was one of the things that was a driver. And there were many comrades that we could be able to say we owe inspiration to. You know, I will be honest to say that amongst comrades that we will say there's a lot we learn from, even at the early stages. Comrade Mandla Tlachoayo and Comrade Sabelo Dlamini. Sabelo Dlamini and Mandla Tlachoayo. By the way, I was introduced by Sabelo Dlamini to Mandla Tlachoayo and vice versa. So it was interesting. But there's a lot we learned. I was a
By the way, Sabelo Dlamini is the university student. I mean, for people who may not know, who started, or rather, who contributed to the Black Wednesday.
Oh, Black Wednesday, yes.
Black Wednesday, yes.
Sabelo Dlamini. We used to call him Prazo. That's why I was the chairperson of the debate society for 4 years, because of Sabelo. He was able to engineer that thing. But anyway, that's separate. I just want to say, one thing that generally I had believed in is when you do something, it must have an outlook. It must have a shape, content. You don't do something that you can't say the tail and the head. It's an amoeba that is endless. So generally, even from church, when I was a youth leader in the church, I was a youth leader in the student movement, a youth leader before the political movement. In the community, at some point, I used to play football, and I was the captain of my team, of the team that we used to play with. It was an unofficial. Then with Sydney, I also played officially Mbabane Dribbling Wizard, but for a short time. Unlike my brother was a real ardent soccer player. Mm-hmm. So generally, organization and what you do, taking an outlook, being impressed and inspired by shape, content, and substance, became a career or a path that was to shape my outlook. Also, I don't want to give, in a small way, my father and my mother. You know, my mother was not so much educated, but you'd never go to a shop without a list of things and how much they cost. At that time, there are few people even now who do budget before they go shopping. But my mother would never make a mistake on that.
So to you, organization and being organized is very important.
Very important. And she used to be treasurer of the Women's League in the whole of Swazi, what we used to call Swazi Second in the Lutheran Church. And so I learned a lot. She would organize imali from Bomag and Ama cooperatives. I fag envelope in IC. But she would never interfere with the money. We were not that. We would not have money, but money is seated here. Tomorrow, it's at
But I want to check, how does that inform your outlook then to the youth politics? That's what I want to get into.
No, into the youth politics is about the fact that there's a good cause here, but the cause is disorganized. Or it's not sufficient. It's a stage of development. Let me not judge it and say disorganized. But it's a stage of development. So every generation doesn't spend time complaining about the previous generation. It spends time elevating the struggle to the next level. You learn and you're inspired by those below you, but they will have their own shortcomings, just as you will have your own shortcoming. So take it to the next level. That's why one of the things that was to change dramatically, it was the fact that, no, the new Swaziland does not exist in cleaning the streets only. It must become a vision that can inspire the youth. We develop what was called the youth charter. What is the youth struggling for? The future of the youth is the future of society. So you don't just fight for slogans that are nice, that are brave. You fight for something that you can touch. It will change the lives of your children. Amika Capral's words. That we are not fighting only for ideas. Neither are we fighting for, again, just because we are angry. We are fighting for tangible things. What are the tangible things? The charter always illustrated the future built on the inspiration of our collective desire to see justice, education, health, and dignity for all people. Then you can list what specifically belongs to the youth, but the future of the youth is not separate from them. By the way, the slogan of SNAS, we are members of the community first before we are students, was our manifesto, the Progressive Alliance manifesto. That's what we believed. We used to say we are in Mpulen, just next door. People are living in misery. We will not build a palace surrounded by misery. So we are members of the community before we are students.
But Masuku, one of the hallmarks of everyone who has interfaced with you is political education. You've been known for political education. Why did you believe so much in political education? And I'll explain why I say this. Because we feel you must go and fight in the streets. You must, that's the nature. That's what activism is to other activists. But when you always wanted a combination of the two, and that many people opposed you when you were introducing politically. Why and why was it important to you?
No, absolutely. First and foremost, let me take it a step back and say, a Marxist knows theory and practice. Practice and theory, it's a praxis. None without the other. So a Marxist will know that dialectics say the interconnectedness of things. If you don't practice your theory, it becomes abstract. If you don't act your theory,
it becomes dogma.
It's dogma. Yes. So a Marxist, first and foremost, knows it's about people, but there must be clarity to take organized. Organization means organized action. So if you don't have organized action, organization, it defeats the purpose. You can be on the streets fighting, angry, insulting. There's no change, democratic change, anti-imperialism, anti-sexism, anti-class oppression or inequalities that will change. What changes things is first of all to know what you want from what you don't want or what you have. The future is built on the present and the past, but not to repeat the present and the past. The future must be something different. What is the future that the youth is fighting for? Clarifying that outlook then helps. So ideological education up to now, ideology means ideas that change power relations. People think ideology is Marxism. No, even capitalism is an ideology. It's an ideology of the rich, of the ruling class. Marxism is an ideology of the oppressed, of the working class. So no one ideology. Ideology is how the system of ideas is organized. So ideological education means there's a difference between a gun that is loaded but can shoot anywhere and a gun that is aimed properly. So how the youth must enhance its development. So ideological development means development beyond where you are. If you don't develop me, when you take me, you can use me as you like. That's what leaders do today. They mobilize you around anything, and you begin to think they are the future. Your future is them. somlandela lapho eya khona somlandela awungena emgodini umuntu solumlandzela. So to separate a principle from a person is very important.
But is it not why you were so intent on political education? You normally used to use a lot of word of backwardness, you know. How did you want the Swazi struggle to have structure and form and content as opposed to just shouting, you know, there are also extremes of people who just sit and write and analyze society and they just become book activists, or they sit in libraries and all of that. But you wanted to give some clarity and you wrote a lot on the Swazi struggle. Just take us a bit around what was your conception of the ideological position of the struggle and how and what outlook it must take.
No, absolutely. First and foremost is to understand that the cause of humanity is one. The divisions of nations are artificial creations by ruling classes to be able. So it's to understand that there is no human being who must suffer, is to grasp us. So the outlook was informed by the fact that the cause of every suffering, oppressed person, is my cause. I don't need to be in that position. By the way, when I finished university, I could be able to work, but I learned a lot from those comrades who were before us. Credit must be given to some comrades who did a lot of work. So they developed a model of organizations. Ours was to make it
to the next level, yeah.
Yes, they had already developed a vehicle. They had already been to treason trial. They had already been able to set the parameters in a society that was literally so backward and underdeveloped in many ways. So they developed organization. There's a lot we learn from them, but also comparative experiences. I love the Vietnamese, and there's nothing that can separate them from them. The Vietnamese, the Cubans, I'm talking about the small countries that proved and exposed the lie. Imperialism cannot be challenged. Small countries, but their bravery is unbelievable. They don't need to be big and have resources. Some people today would say what South Africa did, who is South Africa, it is nothing. But South Africa proved it. Proved it outside all the European countries who tell us about the rule of law. But South Africa just proved it. So it's about being able to rise and stand bold. So there's a lot that makes you, when your analysis, groundedness, and organic relationship with the people, with the society, and with the future. You must be in the future while you are here today. So, and then you are able to come back to organize your people to the promised land. Because you've been to the promised land. So when Martin Luther said, I've been to the promised land, it also was inspirational. He was able to drive home the point that there are people who have been to the promised land, who have seen what a better society. Where did they see them? We'll talk later.
Yeah.
But they have seen. So they are coming back to take society to where it is. So ideological outlook is to be able to, and the South African comrades were very helpful. I want to pay tribute to many South African comrades who used to take their time, would not pay them a cent. They will come to our schools right from Johannesburg. Senior leaders to be able to do political education, development, share the practical experiences, and be able to develop us to where we are. We owe them a lot.
But Masuku, doesn't it not concern you? I'm speaking as someone who used to write a lot of the Swazi struggle and the Swazi question, that there has not been as much intellectual rigor or even in the ideological rigor in the progressive camp around what is it that they are fighting for in Swaziland? What is the nature? It seems it's just more about insulting the king, insulting Tinkundla. And why have people like yourselves, who used to be very outspoken about around the content and the context of the Swazi struggle, why have you taken a backseat around giving the correct position of what the Swazi struggle is about? Beyond just Sfuna multi-part.
In dialectics, they say there are several categories of dialectic, time and space. There's a limit to how much you can contribute to society. You would wish, there are so many comrades who we would wish they are still in the front line because they represent the best ethos of what the struggle is about. But they have appreciated they can take a back role and support young people. and support the future. It will not always be up to what we wish, but our heart is always in the right place. We now have different terrains. We continue to make contributions in different sites where we are, and we continue to support those comrades who still represent the best, what are called, there's one South African comrade who used to say, when you say, there were comrades who were in exile, there were comrades who were in the country, he would say, you forgot one category, the finest sons and daughters, wherever they were, but they are the finest.
Yeah.
So the finest are always there. They sometimes take a back seat, front seat, back seat. Every generation produces the finest of its own. And what we must understand is the linkages between the finest of the older generation and the present generation and the future generation. All we do is to support and have good, they might not do it the way we would exactly want it, just like we didn't do it exactly the others' way. They have their own way. But the finest sons and daughters are always in every revolution. Sometimes they take backseat because of different things. We are human beings. We've got life. We don't have energy that can be endless.
Yeah.
There was a time when Oliver Tambo could just look and wish, but his energy had reached its limit.
Yeah, but you also happen to have a very special relationship with Mario Masuku. I mean, it's been a few years now that he died, and you couldn't even bury him. I mean, was your relationship, and what memories do you have of that man?
Oh, I talk less and more about that old man. And I think we will never have peace until we honor that old man. It's sad when you see his legacy being flushed down the way sometimes it is. Mario Masuku, I met him, first time I met him was at Howard at them. I look at this old man that I've seen somewhere in the pictures, and I looked at him, but we share the same surname, but we are not related. But as we were to grow, the old man makes selfless sacrifices. I forever pay tribute. So Mario was one man who would talk less, but do more. He would get into a taxi sometime and come to Johannesburg. The old man is around. How did he come? Why President Angashelang? And sometimes you will meet him in Nelspruit, utanga taxi. The president didn't go to his head. He was a humble old man. Some comrades in the South African struggle, particularly in the ANC and the Communist Party, will tell us different stories and about him and his selflessness. From Swaziland, in the underground of the ANC, he had a life that will always be about giving. So I just want to indicate that Pudemo stands, the legacy of Pudemo up to this day, stands on the proud shoulders of the old man. Ask, sometimes you will be alone. You know, there were blockades that COSATU will organize at Oshuk. Sometimes I will be the president of Sayoko and you will be the president of Pudemo. The rest will be South African. And the South African comrades will ask, we appreciate it that one day they will be here. We knew it was not for nothing. And then the old man along the way, but put him up blockade just for him. He would spend many days in jail just for the cause. So at that time when I met him, he was working at the Barclays Bank. Delegation, when he became deputy president, the delegation of Pudemo later then realized, no, this old man must come back and be the president. We persuaded him. There was persuasion even by senior members of Pudemo. He first of all was uncomfortable. He would just be the deputy. But ultimately he was convinced. And then how to build Sayoko, we're able to build on him because sometimes he would not be seen as theoretically advanced, but he was the most advanced human being that I've been close to. And we will honor him until our last days in our lives.
You talk about the legacy of Pudemo and Mario Masuku. You seem to have drifted a bit from the party, and it has been hogging headlines for all the wrong reasons in the past few weeks or even months now. Do you feel that in the national prestige and the heritage of the struggling in the country, that the organization has been able to occupy its right place? or maybe it has gone a little bit the PAC way or route? And what is your interpretation of the events that have happened and the name of the organization being dragged in the mind? What has gone wrong and what could come back to assist it, if at all you still are interested to play a role in assisting it?
No, I just think that there are two things. An organization is like a human being. You go through different experiences. Sometimes your health is low, sometimes your health is high. It's the natural development of any organic body. So that one we must accept so that we are not hard on ourselves, one. But two, our struggle was not about the colors of one political party or the other. So we never lose sight. That's why I said I'm a Marxist first. The rest is secondary to me. It's about the cause of the working class and the poor in Swaziland, in Africa, all over the world. Organizations will come and go. I will never feel sad that this or that organization, but though I have sentiment, I have attachment, but that will never distract me. I have confidence in the youth, in the working class, in the sons and daughters of the working poor. So just like I could come from humble being, there were many who came from humble beings and did something. There were many who will come. There are many who will come and do that. So we don't moan endlessly. We just say we have confidence in the youth and that it will reclaim its rightful space in different forms. Sometimes I want to make an example. In the future, I never wanted to associate anything with the colors of the Swazi flag. But the youth has been organic. It understood the evolution of the struggle. So my dogma of certain colors have accepted that the evolution changes. It's the dialectic. So I just want to say that every day we learn that the terrain changed, but the cause is one. There are young people who are replicating the best sons and daughters of the people.
One of the things, Masuku, when you went to South Africa, our readers or people 2000 may not know, is that you went into exile. But in South Africa, you were more of a symbol of international struggles than perhaps Swaziland. Maybe, Swaziland, yes, your identity. But you are very big on Palestine, on Cuba, on international and African issues. Why do you immerse yourself so much on the cause of the Cubans and the Palestinians and the Western Sahara and all of those third world struggles? What do they mean to you as a Swazi and as a Marxist, as you put it?
Yes, first and foremost, we must appreciate that the struggle didn't start now. It has been a struggle against colonialism, imperialism, now
slavery,
varying forms of imperialism, fascism. It's evolving, it's continuing. It's one struggle, different terrains, different spaces. That's why I always use the category time and space changes, but the cause remains. So truly, someone said the only people during the Cuba conference that took place recently in Mpumalanga, someone said, you know, Marxists don't need to be convinced about other people's struggles. Once you're a Marxist first, you just get it right. National borders are artificial. It's human beings who created national borders. Every human being across borders deserves dignity, justice, and equality. Once you're a Marxist, you get it right. The rest is secondary. So how you begin to learn the experiences and share the pains, like Che Guevara always said, we use it in the Swaziland Solidarity Network, be capable of feeling deep within the suffering of other human beings, wherever they are. Che Guevara could move from Bolivia to Cuba, to Congo, and back to Bolivia. It didn't care that it was a border. His humanism. There is a new documentary that has been released by a US-based Ethiopian, marvelous, about the Cuban. If they are human beings that are outstanding, I'm still to see a human being who can match Commandant Fidel Castro. Every day I believe this man. He didn't fancy and romanticize anybody else. He just did what he could. Cuba is such a small island, very small. But how it was able to link not only with Africa, with the global south. The world today, the world economy today, is moving from the global north to the global east and south. That's why the Asia and Africa must understand that very well in Latin America. The axis of the global south, the struggle against imperialism is where the world is shifting to. That the north is fighting endless, its hegemony is being compromised. If there's nowhere else that is being demonstrated, it's Israel. Israel's imperial hegemony has reached a dead end. There's nowhere else it will go. It will just not be. It has been able to demonstrate the limits of imperialism in the current age. So, but the hegemony that we used to take for granted, that imperialism is forever, the domination of the model of development is forever. Today, there are different models of civilization, different models of development, including what we call democracy, social justice, equality, is being challenged. The world is developing innovatively models that are challenging our thinking, including whether this form of democracy or that form of democracy is the only one. No. People are searching endlessly for models of development that will be able to evolve with them, to be able to develop and meet their needs, and a leadership that is neither backward, feudalism, neither capitalist, but that places society at the center of development.
So would you say, for example, in your conception, the model of development that you would favor for your country, would it be the Cuban or the Chinese, or a mixture of both?
I would say let us learn from the West, from the East, from the South, and develop more. That's why you need political scientists who are alive. Political scientists who are able to develop. You know, the Chinese have what is called the three C's, three civilizations. The different models, they were able to develop to take almost 1.4 billion people out of poverty. How many are the people of Swaziland or even Southern Africa as a whole? We are not even a village there. So it reflects that meeting human needs is not a one-way traffic, but equal. I don't want that we begin to think that Tinkundla must think backwardness of gathering people as Bayen is going to serve the future society. It's not. So the ability to understand the future in the past and balance it is very important. That's why we must innovatively say, what change will the change we are looking for bring? Not what party will it bring? What change that will be able to impact on people and their lives? Because we have seen also, overemphasizing on multi-party democracy is not changing Africa. So multi-party democracy must be challenged. What new that it brings to people? So the lessons must be from all over. By the way, the people who developed in the world are not those who copied A, B, C revolution, are those who took the best lesson everywhere, including in the center of the belly of the beast, at the center of imperialism. There is a lot you can learn there, part of which they have learned also from even the South and the East. So we must learn everywhere. We must not be dogmatic. We must learn everywhere, everything, and then develop the best experiments.
Would you say, if I'm listening to you, then if you are so much shaken or you are not sure about multi, or basically put it like this, you say that multi-party for its own sake is not enough to the question of Swaziland. Therefore, we must look at giving meaning to what change is in Swaziland. If I'm sitting here, I'm saying, Tinkundla is the way. Lembe multi-party is not the panacea to our problems. Would you agree with me?
If we were to say putting a political party into power is the solution, then we will be two reductionists of our structure. That's exactly why in Swayoko we said, we see the manifesto for them. It's good. We want multi-party democracy. But you cannot have multi-party democracy where elites and palace politics overrule the substance. That means whether it's multi-party democracy, but the most important thing, what revolutionary substance is it changing in the life of Mage Ngwenya le Ngaba, Mage Dlamini le Mpuleni? That's the answer. That's why Fidel Castro, when he was asked by South Africans, we are told, whether here is the right policy for South Africa. He said if it adds a plate on the table of a family, it's the right policy. That's the only way to
So
determine.
whether you need the cat, whether it catches, as long as it catches mouse.
Full stop. So I will not necessarily call it names. A political party that represents, by the way, the Republicans is a political party. Just like the most reactionary, the Sierra Leonean, RUF, was a political party. We must not think political parties just as in political parties are change. You need revolutionary, profound change that change power relations in the benefit of society. The ultimate, because lumpens organize themselves into political parties. Opportunists are in political parties. They always look at vehicles. So the most important thing is not the colors of the vehicle. That's why I don't care about colors. I don't care about political party names. I care about the substance. Tomorrow, if you were to have a political party that will bring qualitative change in Swaziland, in Africa, don't make a mistake. Or not play around colors. I don't owe any colors anything. I've made a contribution not to colors, not to a party, through a party to society.
So you see the party as just a vehicle, not an end in itself. Okay.
I will not fight anyone who brings change because he's in a different political party. Yes. I will not fight to defend any person because he's in the right political party. Because when he or she is doing something.
So, but if you're talking about political party, I want us to reflect a bit about this, that's happening in Africa. In fact, in liberation movement in general, the sense is that the political parties are struggling to transform, to move with the times, to govern better, to a point that I may very well be despondent that why should we go to multi-party? Because if you look at the ANC, it's the biggest political party in Africa. It's the oldest political party in Africa. Well, maybe not the biggest, but the oldest. But it's still standing. But you look at the CCC in Zimbabwe, in MDC, and the history between the two, and then suddenly the crisis. You look at the opposition, not happy. You look at Botswana, the opposition has cracked 4 times. You look at the opposition in Swaziland, it's not inspiring any confidence. You can go up to the CCM in Ghana, the first political party in Zambia. Those political parties have disintegrated. The reason I'm asking you this is because you also must invest in organizational development, and you are big on this. How do you balance the two things that you say, that on the one hand, you want political parties to grow as an institution, on the other hand, you are also not really caring much about whether or not they are there. As long as there's another vehicle, then it must go.
No, not necessarily that I don't care much. I care about their substance. When their substance begin to represent the status quo, why would I care about them? Because the only difference is the name. So I don't worry about names. I worry about substance. What do you bring that is profound? Where it starts with the revolutionary substance. Whether you represent something fundamentally different from the status quo, or you are a version. You see, one coin, 2 sides. If you are a version of the system but in a different form, even if I was once a member, why would I worry about that? So I'm just making it general in Africa that political parties, there's a lot we can learn from the Chinese, by the way. That's why it comes back to what was the fundamental axis of our outlook. It was about the class struggle, because elites, opportunists will in society forever be there. They look where power is. When elites have hijacked well-intentioned project and organization, and they have successfully done so, do you lament that I will anyway still be attached to the colors? The only thing that is different is the colors, or not? You help the youth to be able to organize. By the way, Swaziland has a history of political parties. And NLC made a huge contribution. But would you still blame it and mourn in the past? The same will happen to all the political parties. They will suffer the same fate. It's the nature of history and progress. Once we miss that point, what do we become? Dogmatists. So dogma is not a science. Dogma is being steeped in the past, in the midst of change, like dolphins, or not dolphins, the dinosaurs. What was their plight? They were extinct because they couldn't understand change. Dialectics have one thing: the interconnectedness between the past, the present, and the future. And the movements must be understood. They are not going to take the same form. The fact that I was born and these colors represented progress may change. In Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in Swaziland, in Tanzania, everywhere. But what must remain constant is change. Progressive revolutionary change. Where it changes to, it's a subject of different specific That's why you must study the subjective and the objective condition. The balance between the two is very important.
But so what's your state, so what's your assessment of the state of the progressive Pan-Africanist political parties in Africa? Are you happy with African solidarity? Because there's a lot of, I'm going to use a very harsh word, backwardness even within political parties in Africa. That they're just merely oppositionist, that they're just opposing the status quo. But if you look at the substance of what do they stand for, you find that it's really the same coin or an extension of right-wing or backward political ideologies and all of that. So what's your assessment of progressive political parties in Africa, and what needs to be done to foster progressive political or revolutionary political parties?
I just think political parties will not always be the only entity in Africa. We must forge a progressive movement. A progressive movement is the student movement, is the trade union movement, is progressive church movement, is progressive environmental forces. Because not all of us came one way. We have many people fundis and made a progressive contribution. We have many people who came from the student movement. So we must always nourish the movement. The movement must always be at the center. The movement, by the way, is not just one organization. The movement is a multifaceted. Look at America. Latin America. The Sao Paulo forums and all the like, and the role they have played. They were not an organization. Progressive academics, progressive students, progressive NGOs, progressive community organizations. So we must always nourish that. Leadership is not a preserve of political parties. Leadership is not a preserve of political parties. Sometimes the worst opportunists can be found in political parties. So what we must understand is that revolutionary leadership sometimes come from unexpected centers. Students, trade union, environmental, women's organization, and other forms. Look at the Black Lives Matter, how it contributed qualitatively to change globally. It's not just one form. So that's why the form is a metamorphosis. The form changes, but the content must remain constant, substantive. So we must always be on the lookout for the movement rather than political parties or organizations. The students, the youth, always our focus is one, is the progressive content, class struggle. All the rest are a matter of form. Substance is about what is the difference and how does it take us to the next step, which you call, that's why we are called progressive. Because not everyone who wants democracy is progressive. There are those who want, the Republicans in the US are Democrats. The Conservatives in the UK are Democrats. There are many Democrats, but we are looking for a revolutionary democratic change. That's what makes us progressives, because we want progress.
And then I always ask this one about the Swaziland as a state. Do you see Swaziland in the next 50 years as a viable independent state, or must work towards integration into South Africa in the economies?
Unfortunately, if I look at evidence globally, economies of scale, when you do economics, economies of scale are beginning to talk more than entities. In Africa, we're 55 nations. But if you were to take, I don't want to be in Southern Africa, Djibouti or Sao Tome, and say it must go and negotiate with the European Union. So the balance of evidence says humanity is striving towards inclusive, flexible interaction and economies of scale, sizes, competitive, and scales, if I were to use the word. So if you have, with due respect, 1 million people, and you must trade with China's 1.4 billion people, what's the future of that? So evidence suggests, whether we do like it or we don't like it, it doesn't rely on our sentiments. Evidence suggests the future of Southern Africa is not in the small entities. The enclaves that were created by Britain surrounding South Africa were created for convenience in Britain. It's the same reason why Taiwan was created or was taken out of China. It's because the enclaves are forever used to upset the bigger and to play, to be used as the fodder for the bigger economy. If you have Swaziland or Lesotho representing Africa in the UN Security Council, and then the UN Security Council is supposed to deploy people to the DRC, what will it do? How will it be able to tell the US not to stop deploying or to tell China to stop deploying to the US? It's just none there. So I think, I'm not a person who's sentimental. I just believe that evidence says economies of scale work. That's why I focus on Africa. I'm no longer much into small enclaves that are being used against the other by bigger states and families, whether it's this family or that family. I'm no longer interested in that. I'm interested in the development of humanity in Africa in an age where the world is big on competitiveness, competitiveness not against humanity, but in a manner that brings our people together to leverage their ability on a world scale to be. 1.4 billion Africans are more important than
1 million.
enclaves.
The other thing I wanted to find out, Masuku, is a nuanced conversation around what's the future of the monarchy in the country. It's been, I mean, if you ask the progressives today, they'll give you 55 answers around what should be the future of. And I want you to locate it in the African context, because sometimes we want to separate Swaziland from that. I want to find out, where do you think is the future of the monarchy in Swaziland, and what is your orientation around them in as far as also Africa is concerned? Because it's one thing to want to remove them in Swaziland if you have the power, but they are there. They've shown their tenacity even in far bigger struggles. They've remained. What's your take about the question of constitutional monarchy, republic, and all of that?
No, I've always been clear that monarchies belong to a particular era in life. But the British have tried, together with some of the Europeans, have been able to try and seek its relevance moving forward. But they are being questioned now about whether they will be able to sustain it into the next age. We'll see. But generally, all I'm interested in is how you empower people not to be ruled by a family. I don't understand how Dlamini affairs should affect me. If we pay tax, I pay tax for a road, I pay tax for water, I pay tax for electricity. Where will the tax come from to sustain a fat family of lazy bunches seated in that Banesh Bayasab? Where will it come from? So I personally say, if you want to pay double taxation, that's your choice. I will not interfere with it. But I'm consistent. A family must wake up and look for a job and earn its life by merit. The massages and the nuances of constitutional monarchy at some point were necessary, but daily they are proving that scientifically they are unsustainable. You know, the monarchies in Europe, including in Saudi Arabia and Asia, they were sustained by the colonial tax. Who will you colonize in order to subsidize the royal emoluments? In Swaziland, there are two treasuries. There is a central treasury based in Babane. There is a Swazi national treasury, specifically to feed the family. The royal emoluments, civil list, and all the like. So we pay tax, they take from their own, that is specifically theirs, and then they still take from the central treasury. How will that be sustainable? The people of Swaziland, they are telling them, there will be water, there will be services, there will be roads. Where will you get that, man? So the choice in Swaziland is between a fat, lazy family and a tax for services, transport, and development of society. And I'm afraid the people will not tolerate that forever. I hope my belief is not going to be proven true. Because unfortunately, we can change forms of organization. Political parties will be rendered irrelevant if they are unable to understand that science of development is such that you will not have the budget, the extra budget that will sustain that family. It has been feeding on parasitism. If you want to sustain a parasitic budget, then continue with it. So I just think some hard truths are uncomfortable to talk about, but there must be people who keep sticking to them.
Mm-hmm. And then also there's been a lot of, and I really don't want to get into that, but one of my frustration is that in terms of the clarity of ideas in the progressive camp in the country, and I'm taking you back to that discussion, has not been sufficient. If you look at the amount of written literature of the South African struggle, for example, on its history, on many, many issues, there were books and books. There were books and books written about almost everything that represents the future, the progressive future of the country that was to be democratic in the future. Are you happy with the literature that's being produced by the progressives around all issues, around land, around the trade unions, the students, you name it?
No, definitely not. It's far from what it should be. It is very far from what it should be. You know, one South African comrade, I'm saying this, I'm laughing because now he's a deputy minister, in one of our political schools, says his view, with humility and respect to the Swazi structure, he feels the Swazi structure is way too under-theorized.
Yes.
Because we were unable to capture. He felt, for instance, the material on land in Swaziland, you will find something in University of Western Cape more than you will find in Swaziland. So the political economy, those who do political science and economics will tell you that they will be unable to find, there was what used to be called SSRU. I'm not sure whether it still exists, in that context. This SSRU is the Social Science Research Unit. It was just something that was way too staffed. It was something that was way too staffed. What we do not have in Swaziland is progressive research and academic institutions that are alternative informed. So you produce and reproduce academics and elites who are either sloganeering without alternatives or regurgitating the system's dominant views. That's what you produce. You don't produce substantive alternative. So the SSRU at the university was way too undernourished and underdeveloped. So what is lacking in Swaziland is the infrastructure of progressive alternatives. What produce and reproduce alternatives, substantive alternatives that are real on land, on health, on education, on funding, on development models, on democratic, sustained participatory participation, not the artificial participation. So the extremes of participation is either spire or a figment of democracy called a parliament that is a shade of itself. Both of them are neither the solution. You have a spire, people seated there making a lot of empty hot air, and you have a parliament that is owned by a family, by somebody who calls it whenever he wants. Both of them are not a figment of imagination, but what is a substantive parliament, policy-making, substantive informed institutions that we must be able to develop to change neither spire nor a toy parliament. Neither spire nor a toy parliament, but substantive democratic developmental institutions that have policy, have research, have the figures and the science to prove that they can be able to change society. At the moment, we have a problem of a narrative that is uninformed, that has no science, that people are looking at us and saying, the people are not even believing in what they are talking themselves. So how can we believe in it?
Yeah. And then last one, Masuku, is that the progressive camp has been fragmented. And but also the one thing that you've always been very keen on is the trade union movement. The trade union movement has been, in fact, the progressive platforms, onge sekalimele. And I want to find out from you, what do you think can be done to recalibrate the struggle, to bring back unity, to bring back the sting of the struggle, and also what challenge do you throw to the youth around this real question you're posing about under-theorizing of the Swazi struggle? Because, at least from my experience, I'm seeing a lot of multi-party tingundla, asimfuni Mswati, there's no substance around what is the change, what's the meaning of the change, and how far deep is this change, and who is the problem, and what is the solution. Those are things to me that I still think are a challenge.
If I were to be honest, I believe definitely in two key components of most of the struggles. Is the students and the trade union. If you organize the MDM, the Mass Democratic Movement, if you organize the Mass Democratic Movement, it also can't just be an amoeba, shapeless amoeba. It has two key components that, from our practical experience, we used. Is the students, which produces young women, young men who are revolutionaries. The students' components then anchors the youth general, but the students stroke youth and the trade union. So those two, you don't get. The others are drawn together by this. If you look at most revolution, including, by the way, in South Africa, where we learned a lot, students in history are indispensable. Students are indispensable, and there is no argument about that. Castro was a student. Many of comrades who made qualitative changes in society, Kwame Nkrumah, connected a student. So I just believe in students and the trade union movement as the anchor of a progressive MDM. Political parties are an output or a manifestation of that form of organization. But even then, you still need to learn. The Vietnamese experience taught us one thing. Even if you're a united front, if it's not led by class conscious, the advanced detachment, it's led by any Harry, Tom, Dick, and Ken. It will reflect that Harry, Tom, Dick, and Ken. So with the Vietnamese revolution, it was a united front of all democratic forces, but led by the most advanced detachment. It's indispensable, non-negotiable, that the advanced detachment must place itself to lead society, because the backward ones will lead society to where? To backward, to behind. The advanced detachment is the only one that represents progress, that represents the future, that represents progress. And it, of course, will not be placed by pity and charity, by the favors of someone. It will be placed by its own work, its own clarity, its own grasp of its own terrain, and its own understanding of society. It must root itself in what we used to call the concrete conditions of Swazi society. You can't copycat any condition. You must organically evolve out of the conditions of Swaziland. But backward detachment leads us backward. We need the advanced detachment.
How do you determine that advance? Does it just appoint itself?
It doesn't. It's science. It's tools of analysis. They must be advanced. You will be able to, that's why we always say, your outlook. If you are half Sibaya and partly Sibaya and half capitalist or half that, you just think political parties at the beginning and the alpha and omega, you don't say particular political parties, revolutionary political parties. So the advanced detachment is the one that represents the future aspirations of society, because the class content they represent is scientific.
So in this case, are you saying in order to recalibrate the Swazi struggle, we need to find these advanced, or do they emerge of their own,
No, they
or do they
emerge.
organically come? Where do they come?
No, they emerge. No one appoint. It's not an appointment. A struggle is a determination of tried and tested. You earn credentials. You don't go around being appointed because you are either in the right family or because you go around spewing a few patronage networks, funding this Tom, Dick and Ken. No. You earn. It's not decreed. You earn the stripe. So the advanced detachment and its stripe, as you will remember in Cuba, that the July 26 movement was not a communist party. So it's not in the name. It's in the class content. And they were defeated. At some point, Fidel said they were joking as a bunch of few in the mountain. But they regrouped because they knew to lead society is not going to be seeking pity and becoming a charity case somewhere. You regroup and understand every failure and the weakness are the best laboratories for the future of society and for the lessons of what you must do and what you mustn't do. Science always informs progress.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Masu. We really appreciate this very profound conversation around a variety of other things. But I would have done a lot of disservice to you and to people who know you about the Palestinians. And then, are you not surprised how they've... or rather, let me put it this. How have the Palestinians managed to make their struggle so global, so touching, and also... because it doesn't happen by miracle. There is a genocide somewhere, then suddenly the world wakes up, or rather that we all feel the need to contribute to the Palestinians. And you've been very vocal on the Palestinians. Do you have comments about first the things that have happened in the ICJ, the genocide, and how even America, they're struggling to get back their hegemony, that is the Zionists, and your own experiences of having been fought by the Zionists all the way to the Constitutional Court in South Africa?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's both the work of the Palestinians and outstanding internationalists, including the Cuban. Sometimes we take for granted how much certain countries and people made the cause we take for granted today to be known when it was not fashionable. To send troops to this, to send engineers to this, to send doctors to this cause and that cause. So it's a combination of both. So the Palestinian struggle and the Cuban struggle, the Palestinian struggle, okay, the Cuban struggle and the Palestinian struggle represent the world's geopolitical balance of power. You can have struggles, but until you are tested by the Zionist lobby, you have not yet seen what the real imperialism is like. The Zionist lobby in the US is not ruled by the Republicans and the Democrats. It's ruled by AIPAC. AIPAC is I think you know it. AIPAC is the one that summons all presidents in the United States to give them the line. Until you have been to AIPAC, you will not be able to, you will not rule the world. So in the world, the Palestinian question is not just a stain on your small nationalist consciousness. It's a stain on all who bear the burden of being human beings. If you have been colonized, dispossessed, and you live in a big prison, which Alexandra was, which Soweto, which was and still is, which Soweto was and still is, which Sunduza was and still is, which you have different sizes, but all of them are open air prisons where people have no dignity, no sanitation, no water, no...
It's modernized concentration camps.
So Gaza talks to you. West Bank talks to you. So how human beings have been dispossessed, not only of their land, but of their dignity, just because they are of the wrong race. They are not the chosen race. Then you must know how it feels, how the pain of misery. Unless you are touched by that, you must challenge your humanity. Whether you still truly are a human being, no amount of going to church will challenge you until you can see how your neighbor is being scavenged and savaged by a system. So Palestine, Western Sahara, Africa in large part are an intersection of how human beings and humanity are always. I always tell people who say Palestine is outside Africa, I say Sinai Peninsula is in Africa. The Red Sea is in Africa. The war is being fought on African land. Africa cannot run away from Palestine. I'm very sorry for you. And you will choose or not choose. The intersection of the Red Sea, having been to Eritrea, having seen the Red Sea literally, you begin to feel Africa. That's where the Houthis and the Yemenis and the US-Iran intersection and war, and the Suez Canal is part of Africa, part of it. So Africa cannot choose to run away. And thanks to South Africans, thanks to the selflessness of South Africans and the revolutionaries, particularly the Revolutionary Alliance of South Africa, in the midst of their challenges, in the midst of difficulties, they didn't say they have nothing, because they did have something and they have given it. They put it on the table. I'm very sorry for the Palestinians that their surrounding monarchies, Saudi Arabia, and them are such a shame. It's very sad. At least the Iranians are trying to stand up, but the Americans are threatening them. But I think South Africa did what was best, and we are proud as Africans that South Africa did it. It's for all of us, and we are proud to Palestine.
Thank you so much, Masuku. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thank you for everything.